Al nimbara al tinyang al sama al ularo be dawda mo be konto ma fu men personal page la ba fombe na page la ba I don't know I said no man me more be konto na I guess take a little bit of time. Let's see if I can make that. Without that, I'll come by, let me know. I'm a more big content, so campaign season will start, I guess. NPPJ ko fan ay mitino ke kefseri. Mela mol la moy de bar ngala ke lawol. Ko sita kuma fala sa mol ñanta mem moy. Monsieur na baraka o ja. Ngal li ñanta dal kuma fala mo ñanta mel la moy la sa. Na man ke la scandal di ngaw fitini nga ja ñani kayto ni mol la ñinatin. Bari fa fam fa ja be fan ya. But basically say campaign will start. So focus ñoo hakilo blend. Mama follow mol ya wala ka mol ñinen ka fo ni ko election sira for the problem is the candidate or the party or del fangol Gambian. Because in best sira nga ko do len mira like from dafala Jawara la time because Jawara mosa fo ka Jawara compete ko yalla a karanda ay londo sodo ay afa maji ay ala do ko no Mafoko PPP government was perfect. That's far from the issue. There were issues all at Nafon, and many of who do not know massive Dibanyol Sifa, Asamusa, Cameron Sifa that they are opposed. That alone tells you there are issues. So it was far from perfect. But Nana Ko Katala challenge. If I challenge then basically Jawara was a Democrat. Despite all the flaws, he was a Democrat, well respected across the world. Whether it's in the Islamic world or the African, continent, even across in the diaspora, people respected him because of his, I have present Nyame. So truly he was a Democrat. Challenging Jawara was not an easy thing. But even those who challenged him, many alanko wale Lord Jawara face, Sirif Dibanyol, Asan Musa Kamaranyol, they were all highly educated, highly skilled, highly experienced, with a good track record. So we had a very good caliber of politicians in the First Republic. So they all use that as a yardstick. Let's just say Jawara government basically was hard to challenge, despite all its flaws, but they were on track, even though it was slow. All these institutions we brag about, the education system, parastatal yellow and everything, will make it on the Jawara government. Now we can brag about them. They were on track. But we need to go as far back as that period. Puruka quality and the mall, Ilata Nyadi. 2016, Sai Mol Kamanavo, UDP gave us Barrow. Fine. And then the other argument, why is it that Halifa Saleh will be in the mix of those contesting and then they select somebody like Adam Barrow? True. He is more qualified. We know him better than we know Adam Barrow, even people in the UDP. But that aside, that is just picking on one thing, taking it out of context. Wala ko kuwal me mekeno no wato mol Kenya kas wala. Mayat na Adam Barrow fintana for mol ba select la as leader of the UDP and then subsequently leader of the coalition. So wala na mol ye fanyin ka Gambia and do we care about the candidate that is presented to us or do we care about issues? I'll use the example of PDIS. Halifa Saleh did not emerge on the political scene in 2016. Covered in 1986, PDIS Finditanang, Yela Patiolo. Halifa Saleh na Akafunyol, Sam Sarnyol, Sidia Jatanyol, and in Dole, many PDIS law. 1986, they Finditanang force. Can I join political Gambia? Otamo, election of Kenya, the party with the majority will let a government form. Gambia never had presidential elections per se until I think it was 1987. Let me check here. So we had legislative or House of Representative elections in all the elections leading up to 1987. That was the first presidential election. Yeah. Actually, 1982. Yep, 1982 was the first presidential election in the Gambia. So before that, it was House of Representatives in 1977. Before that, it was the House of Representatives in 1972. I don't remember what thing is happening to me. I can't pronounce words. And then we had the 1970 election, and then the which was the Republican plebiscite, and then we had the 1966 House of. So basically, PPP always won the majority. So the president came, kind of like the system in the UK. So in the first election, which was in 1982, is that what I said? After the coup, 1982, we had presidential elections, Sirif Dibo contest. So before 1982, mostly PPP versus UP. Molka nyim party ole for back. Because for Jawara and Imper is PPP, UP, PPP, UP, because party may along ko wala la mol siya parliament, president ko party okon. And Jawara being the leader of the PPP, he became president. So 1982 is our whole first election. 1986, there was another election, PPP, NCP. PDIS was there, but they didn't present a candidate for the presidential elections. In that first presidential election, they contested for the parliamentary elections. They didn't win any seats. But basically, from 1986, PDIS began. Katefai, you can more presently, more Katefai. So that was during the Jawara administration, or 1986 election, because they formed in Savo in the same year, basically. And then there was elections in 1992, then the coup d'etat happened. So coup d'etat caller, Pati Jumala Sorota, because your NCP ban, your GPP ban, your PPP ban, but you'll be baby no Jawara Jamano, you'll be ban, will Mantalo no election or correct. Now I'm PDIS. So caller Pati Kutol Nada by that time, Molsa Foko, okay, sign PDIS, Molsa Tomonol. But the PPP, GPP, NCP, the back of the Nyomale, your party could for me, United Democratic Party, your Monyani, Useno Dawayata Minanya to Pride, continue. So Nyajibe tactically, these parties all have bases. PPP has a base, NCP has a base, GPP has a base, your bases all combined. You can go to very calculated kind of a coalition, Mamokuto Tombong, I Taminya to Melango Maban. So that's how UDP was born, 1996. 1996 basically is where we're going to start from. Yahya Jammeh presented himself, UDP presented Dabo, PDIS presented Sidia Jata for the elections in 1996. But I'm going to get Yahya Jammeh Tombo. Why? 1994 Yahya Jammeh coup d'etat because soldiers with a difference. And talba maralale ron sanji nane ngamuru barak soldo tal musoja rolleti tal manta politician or ni fare bita jahanna bal Yahya Jammeh was saying all kinds of things about politicians. That was in 1994. So for 4 years, Gambian all know through the National Consultative Committee. Then 1996, 2 years, Gambian all also they had to go. So in 1996, Benasila, Yahya Jammeh could be propaganda of all sorts just so he can run. So not until Gambian on the Sundanina ko Tonya Moe Memphai La Hedo Mendi, Namo Timandi, Nyantambalato. If you fail your promises, we shouldn't stand by you. That alone is enough. But let's put that on the side. Coming up on high development kijana school law, university extension program, some GRTS law, I silo doku. Fine. People were attracted to that. But what time of anam, Niajibe West Africa kono, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Kelolo Benunje, abe money military intervention in politics. So we're more silano. Wasilo da ma fa nyanda tinal moli mero ha so yar masa kunna den ko be wasawatin laja abena problem wala sambalna because soldier all communicate counter coup d'etat counter coup d'etat counter coup. In fact, after Yahya Jammeh's coup in 1994, few months later, maybe 2 months, November 1994, the November 11 coup d'etat happened. The soldiers just left out. That was the first sign call. Military government, if it is successful, is going to encourage other soldiers to try and run their own military adventures. So 1994, November 11 happened. many soldiers died, was silang on that day because Bagankol Nyinenka, moments Euros Unoje, Kido Kumaladron, Gambians are not used to that after 1981. People were so afraid. And then, after that November 11, in January, I think Sanasawal Ninsari had a problem also. I called after Kudeta and then, you Nikido the Natta State House. So there was disruption in the administration core. This is not a very stable government. Why? Because people keep coming and trying to overthrow him. Even though there's no evidence for that's what was happening, he just wanted to eliminate people he suspected. But that happened. So that should be a wake-up call. You are rewarding a coup d'etat, and other soldiers are going to be tempted to do the same thing. What that man and that in Algamino Afoko, how you do work, Alhamdulillah, Baraka, Samba civilian or Tombona, Baltry, uniform, one in Yana and be soldier all the mal, Namodofi. Again, the church is all Mujumaldi, Sidia Jara, Lawyer Davo, Yajam, we chose Yajam. Despite the fact that you more floor many over, Walla Farman Satati, Walla Lolondo Banya, Walla Fana, Kebayanta, Bauta Commander for we need Yaya, we don't need Olpa. Fine. 1996 in Safoko, he was new, we need to test him out and stuff like that. That's great. So Ngaya Jametombo World. And then immediately after 1996, what election occurred in September 1996. In November 1996, Farafenya army attack, army barracks. At least 6 soldiers were killed. Why? Because rebel Menyeje attack. So the fear of counter coups is actually taking shape. In November 1996. It was successful, of course. But in July 1997, less than 1 year later, another group of soldiers attacked counter-military barracks. The counter coups were unfolding. So since we elected him, despite all those threats called, remember Liberia, remember Sierra Leone could happen in the Gambia, Molia Jame elect. And then immediately after, Farafenya attack, with the hopes of near Kidol Sotonoto, then they advanced to Banjo, they coup d'etat. That was foiled, luckily. Well, failed to them and Donjin Soja Dolko Itel failed and Nanin Kato Mapol, Frandan Kato. So now it is evident ko, we've encouraged ko, if you are successful, you will be rewarded. That was, playing out. But Menkina Karauta bit, Woflol Kerale, Katon attack, Farafanya attack, Nzafo Soja Damal Lord. Janin next election of Sila in 2001, student all finished in 2000 in Kokana demonstration. Because Moneketa, fire service mole student do mutalia a tojo Casimento diala cardo more dala fata. And in Paral Fana Sunguru no in Japita Kambada in the house. So student all coil after many okay. Yes, some bakitiola, Lua man for your kulu. The meta kuono, we meta kuono, Makasamamba Jabaro, because I'm a Finland and demonstrated such a men yenta kuokele is a lama. What demonstration for a monege? They killed over a dozen children. Kramdo dinol me kidomuta ya bondika yefa. Nera jola mo no time o pada constant sa watel to fin dol cool bacon aka jam fa kon ko jarja o nana manke gambi man sama yalla ka sir mol ko na nyanta marala mol la o mura mol dingol fa ne ko student demonstration jamaani ma ka university student no ba gambi university be njebento high school dingol lam middle school dingol yewol be fa mol sa ko maybe mistake ko lekitable so men ngalon ko responsible dala Yantale all kit in the years wrong. Yajamakuna indemnity for all the soldiers. That alone, what the madam Manyantat Nagamino Africa enough. We don't want this government over our heads anymore because there's so many dangers associated with it. Especially they've killed our children, we are done. It doesn't matter what the issue is, it doesn't matter if he paved the streets with gold. Yeah, you're not doing all falasa and you mol manjari moy masakuna di lang amodo jube ngadi wala because Kavital Naranim beat him. Fine, there was a bloodless coup, but how much blood has been spilled between that time and now? That alone was not enough. That year was April 2000, and then we had elections right after that. I think it was in 2001. We had elections. It was in October 2001, just a little over 1 year. Kabiwa incident ninka. Yajame won over 52% of the votes in that election. Where's the consequence? Despite the fact that all these things happened, the threat of counter coups and unrest in the Gambia because of military interventionists in politics, we rewarded him. On top of that, he killed our children. we still excused it. That was in 2001. Again, Sidia Jata was there, Halifa Sallah was there, of course, Lawyer Dabo was there, Hamad Ba, we can say, also was there, but we chose this guy who was a murderer. So is it about policies? Is it about policies, or were we intimidated? Or is it like, you know, like we don't care about issues? It has to be one of those things. We cannot keep saying, okay, you know, you guys gave us this guy, he is not qualified. When the qualified people were there, what was your excuse of not selecting them? Yeah, Jammeh did all these atrocities. And add to the fact that even in 1996, during the elections, we saw the kind of government we were dealing with, because they used force for everything. Torturing political opponents, abusing them. What happened at Denton Bridge leading to the death of people. We all saw that. That should have been a wake-up call, you know, sounding alarm bells. Okay, this is a military government, they use force to get their way, so we need to get rid of them. We have an opportunity at elections, we rewarded them. And then things just kept escalating from there. From 2001. Between 2001 and 2006, we all know what happened. There was the Ndur Cham coup d'etat in that space. Lawyer Usman Silla was shot. He luckily didn't die, but Deda Hadra was killed in that time period also. Newspapers were set on fire, or their buildings. Journalists were, you know, were disappeared, like Chief Manager. All these things were happening in the Gambia. And then 2006, the opposition actually came together. Even though it didn't work out very well with NAD and everything, but we still have that choice. Halifa Sallah and PDIS, they backed the NAD candidate at the time. I mean, he became the NAD candidate, so he didn't contest under the PDIS banner. But he was there. UDP was also there with, you know, their coalition on the other side. Again, we chose Yahya Jammeh. Despite all these things happening. Between 2006 to 2011, you all see what happened as well. So many instances of abuse and killings and disappearances and, you know, everything Yahya Jammeh made big. But come election time, we had all these candidates present themselves. And PDI's message has not changed. What is the role of government in a democratic dispensation, and what is the role and responsibilities of citizens? That has been their message, basically. But every time we find an excuse, you know, Halifa Tata Winol, oh, Sidi Tata Winol, yeah, PDI is the Molmans here, so we select Yahya Jammeh, we select Yahya Jammeh. And every election, we're just telling him, like, you know, keep doing what you're doing. We're fine with it. And he grew stronger and stronger and more brazen. Why would he not turn around and start insulting the entire group of Mandinkas? I mean, the entire ethnic group of Mandinkas. If Yahya Jammeh had won in 2016, the Gambia would have ceased to be a republic, because people like Lai Senyo, Nunko, we need a monarchy in the Gambia. What do you think would have happened? With a National Assembly like ours in the Gambia, Yahya Jammeh won in 2016, they would just move a motion because we want to Yahya Jammeh crowned as king. And it would have happened. That's how brazen he got. Like, it was just piling on little by little. You know, the threat of counter coups and civil unrest was not enough for Gambians to vote me out. Okay. I kill students, they still voted for me. I start killing journalists, they still voted for me. All this is to silent dissent. All the time, the main opposition was suffering in his hands. But every time, we need Yahya, we don't need Olpa. Fast forward to 2016. When he was ready to finally pounce and, you know, completely destroy the opposition in that country. In fact, in between also, the witch hunts happened, during which he arrested Halifa Sallah for speaking out on behalf of those old people in their villages that they were torturing, because that was torture. Again, elections came, no reward. So what excuse do we have? Is it about the person or the issues? Because if qualification is what mattered, Yahya Jammeh should not have gone beyond 1996. But he did. And he kept going past every obstacle or every hurdle that was in front of him. We allowed him to. So Kabra Pareta opposition of Gambia completely. The main opposition in the country, all of UDP. Near all the Molbe arrest all their executive and everybody. What is left? At that point, it became a matter of survival. It was out of that desperation because Mol Fonkamel near Halivala interview Lamoy on Kerfatu back in I think 2017 or somewhere around that time. He said it and it was true because people were saying it. That was an act of desperation. We are tired, we are fed up, it's enough. He has to go. Do we have to get to that point before we make the next decision? Because it's going to be another bad situation. In the Gambia, it's never about the issues. How many wrongs will Adam Barrow have to do before we keep saying, you know, it's enough? Everything he does, we point to it. Oh, if it was not for UDP, he would not be here. Yeah, Jame is killing people. We need Yaya, we don't need old pa. Yeah, Jame is doing all these evil things. He's building roads, he's building university. Gambia never had a university. Until we got to a point where we were so desperate and that was the time. Out of that desperate situation, Gambians would elect anybody that they want, as long as it was a vote against Yaya Jammeh. Rather than a vote for Adam Barrow. But just like Yaya Jammeh, Adam Barrow for Nanata, I more promise man I fail. Start with the CRC draft. You can go back as far as the promise of I don't know, politics in terms of business manual, you know, after 3 years in the budget. He said that Moman Lika that. So it doesn't matter the situation, he broke that promise, but we can put that to the side. Constitutional review. Everybody whose mind is inside their body and can analyze the most basic things, no scope. That draft constitution failed because of Adam Barrow's desire to cling onto power. Nothing else. There was absolutely no other reason. You can point fingers wherever you want. That was the only reason. I don't want you to count my current term as a term of president. It has to start after my current term. That was all it is. He killed the draft constitution, which was the main campaigning point. Yaya Jammeh used the 1997 constitution to abuse us. We need to change it. A consultation, okay? Ask the Gambian people in the issue document. I participated, I know. And you participated also, you know. One of the questions was, would you want Gambia to amend the 1997 constitution to make it better or come up with a new constitution? That was one of the questions. Overwhelming majority, we just want a new constitution. That was why we have a draft constitution. People were asked. Adam Barrow killed that draft constitution. We just saw Sankoria sentenced to 67 years in America for participating in torture. One incident. Where are the junglers in the Gambia? Bailo in Germany was sentenced. Osman Sonko, who was their boss, both Bailo and Sankoria's boss, was sentenced in Switzerland. Yaya Jammeh is somewhere where there is immunity per se because they will not extradite him. But where are the junglers in the Gambia? So we can say the TRRC was for nothing. Yankuba Toure, if not for his arrogance, nothing would have happened to him either. Where's the civil service reform? The same thing. I'm not saying if people are qualified, you know, political appointments are political appointments. You can appoint whoever you want to appoint. But now we see MPP people coming out saying this is a government for one ethnic group. Nobody was actually looking at that, but they brought it out. So it doesn't matter who Gambians present. Last elections, how many candidates were there? 2021. But when it came down to the wire, the coming from all, you know, Halifa Sallah will not win, SFI will not win. So if we don't vote for Adama Barrow, UDP will be in power. Have we declined or have we advanced as a country in terms of the living standards of the people? So one has to ask the question, does it matter who we present as a candidate? We'll always have the same refrain. You know, yalla moko fatek. So we always, you know, taking responsibility that's completely alien to us. It's always somebody else's fault. Only if they have done this or if they have done the other thing, all that has been done. We get to a point where, you know, you have to have a value, a set of principles. I am for term limits. No person should serve the country. It's a service. You serve for 10 years, you're done. We'll find somebody else to serve us. If you violate that, it doesn't matter what you do, I'm not going to support you. I am that one issue voter. And then on the other side, there's somebody who's a one issue voter. For somebody to be a president in the country, you have to have at least half of the people supporting you to be president. That 50 plus 1. If you don't have that in this constitution, and the power for that entirely is executive willingness to allow that to happen, and the National Assembly would vote for it. But because this president is unwilling to do that, you find an excuse for him. What is your principle then? Oh, he's building schools. It doesn't matter. That one thing is important to you. He's not doing it. He's not willing to do it. And you know he doesn't want to do it. But you still support him. Why? Because, oh, if I don't, you know, the other person that is going to come. Innuendo. Speculation. There are choices. You're only limited by the choice of people that you have. It's as simple as that. If you go to the store, you either have butter pot or butter ice. You cannot tell the shopkeeper to give you a kind of butter that you don't have in his shop. You try and go to another shop. So it's the same thing in the Gambia. When it comes to elections, you can only vote for people who presented themselves and are qualified according to the IEC, and their name is on the ballot. Those are the only people you can vote for. Find one who is an alternative to Adama Barrow. It doesn't have to be one candidate or the other. You find somebody that you believe, God, this person has all it takes to move this country forward. But if you believe, oh, my support is not enough, you know, I don't think he has enough support, somebody else thinks that you're all taking away from his numbers. So just because you don't have your way, the country can get ruined, because you already admitted Adama Barrow needs to go. And if we ask you, based on your own assessment, if you think Adama Barrow should be replaced by SFR, why do you think Adama Barrow should go? You will list 1,010 reasons why Adama Barrow should go. Those reasons are still there. But because you believe SFR's chances are not that great, Adama Barrow can continue. So what about all those reasons you listed? Well, we can live with those. Corruption, abuse, division, tribalism, incompetence, declining status of Gambia on the world stage, the rising cost of living for everyday Gambians, the poor school performance, the non-existent hospital, all of those things are still there. But your refrain is, we can still live with that. UDP is doing their groundwork. SFR is also coming up, you know, putting in the effort. That's all people can do. If you believe somebody else is a better alternative, do the same for them. Campaign. Stop focusing on, you know, what this person should have done this or that. At the end of the day, you can also say, look, we cannot do this if we don't all come together. So let's look at everybody's strengths, everybody's, you know, abilities, and then forge a way forward. But we cannot constantly keep making the same refrain, because human history is human history. It will keep repeating itself. At our Barrow stays, we will get to a point where we are desperate again. And what is that going to lead to? Nobody knows. So we will leave, you know, like Halifa Sallah will say, and give it to your kids to inherit it from you. When are we going to take responsibility? Just take, for example, the protests that are going on. Young people coming out, and see some of the reactions online. If you don't have a permit, you don't need to go out. Genuinely concerned young people for the things that are happening in the country. And it's not just anything, it's things that affect their lives. For example, PURA and the regulations that they put in place. We don't have enough education material in the country. So if you don't have access to the internet to learn about, you know, these vast resources on the internet, but it's going to cost you an arm and a leg to do that. It's affecting the lives of young people who are getting creative. So if they are protesting against that, all they deserve from us is our support. They are not out to ruin the country, to kill people, to destroy property or anything. It's a peaceful protest. But we still find reasons to vilify them. You don't have to agree with the reason why people are protesting. But they have a right to do it, especially if they are not being violent about it, which is a riot. They are not rioting. So again, we ask the question, is it about the person who is presented as candidate, or is it our issue as Gambians to just focus on one trivial issue and make that the issue of the day? That's what we need to ask ourselves. I believe in this, logic, and I think it works until somebody can prove me wrong. If we have Jawara there, and then we are not satisfied with him, election time we remove him. We bring Yahya Jammeh. He started killing people, abusing his office and doing all kinds of things. We remove him and we put Barrow. And if we make that the issue, like he is killing people from 2016 to now, what was Jammeh accused of? Abuse of power, killing people, disappearing his opponents, jailing them, and all that, journalists, and corruption. We elected Barrow. So far, he has not, taken that route. There is signposts that he would. But so far, the only problem we have, the major problem, most important problem we have with his government is corruption because of his ineptitude, his lack of concern for the welfare of Gambians, and poor governance overall. But the abuse, to a large extent, we can say is almost eliminated. He would not dare do that because he knows the Gambian people will not stand for it. That is why Yahya Jammeh was removed. So if he wants to stay in power, he will avoid that. Now, the next government that's coming knows that our main problem right now is corruption. If you come at Diate or Kuyate, you will have to fight corruption. We will not eliminate it 100%. It doesn't matter who comes. Because it's not just the president. When Jawara was there, we all know he had his garden in Abuko, his house in Fajara, and one house in the UK that he didn't even finish paying, even though he was president. It was on a mortgage that he paid monthly. But there was corruption in that government. From senior government officials, from heads of departments, parastatals, whatever you call them. So eliminating corruption, when we say it's not going to be 100% possible, even though we all know Halifa is incorruptible, but he will inherit a system if he is made president where people will still practice corruption. It will be there. So we will not completely eliminate corruption even with the next government, but it will be minimized because they know this is something that the Gambians don't want. So we got rid of the killings. Nobody's going to reintroduce that. If we minimize corruption with the next government, there will still be corruption, and then we can condition them to improve. And if they don't, we remove them, we bring in another government. By that time, corruption would have been at maybe 40% or so. Now your job is to reduce it down to 20% or less than 20%, and then we keep moving forward. It's just simple logic like that. You punish people for doing the wrong thing while they are in power, and then bring in somebody else and demand of them to do better than the person who was there before them. They have no choice but to follow suit. If they don't, we vote them out again. If we make our voting about issues, we will move forward. But every single time we keep looking at each other, at personalities, at our personal grudges. If you don't understand English, I just kind of get carried away because I'm reading stuff and I have to translate. The translation I'm better back, but anyway. So more in Kalawol, it is left Jumale ke president oti, and the man left away ke president. But wati problem all yesro banko kam mol be nyabal mol la bolol be kolearing did no la laptan ikata bor nyino laptan ro ni boro de la boro yefa many o boro samana ye nyaka suwal. No regulation, nothing. Kramol mantra betiare, laptanol mantra betiare, lol ni mol finde bo la silo do kunya silo do kunya akse nyel ka boy sloka dinol hande be motol fran tanko mol la sare ko mol tekle be fensol boy le be kolgal polisol be sular monal jumale karne ita kata wala arrest tinyaro bankoka so mol nyanta men la wala nyandi ko carte fawsital fo nying ninga blaja continue ndel jikita be menkla bo kelal bang nata wala mo carte fa continue ni wonda mo do jube mo leke fan samana mais ya mil fil ko nintelo represent yala mo be carte fa la nyala ya fam present ita fana ya jube fam fe nying fo ninga carte fa basically is it a better alternative to Adama Barrow or not? Ye motom me ala ngote fe nyi sa banko samano e carte fa ba ni ko ka jubel do ha dama la fi karla ni ngata ke je do Adama Barrow fo to je wala fi sar wala ko tinyaro me ke nga continuer do ita jikita men ne ka fo mo len ko ha nyi te jikita la ba men jikita la o man sia so ni kombe na jiko sambalata la asike me ni ka tasoro. At some point it has to be a sacrifice, and it's always one generation that sacrifices for the next generation to benefit. But Intel going to sacrifice la men bentel yo duma la no wolte ko be protest la be kajafi la be doya la be kuma manel fole ni wol ke ba ndo kono ko fam ba fla a ni ko na fana la nga nyakas do ala men ki je na wato sita balaje so wol bije be fan na faale be ba dingol na faala ye tol be fil ko fam kunda do kula jalba ko mem. So basically ngona nga nyene kaja but continue diamola because diamotol be kere but 2026 ninga menol ya feel ko il after Adam Barole continue je ale fasala kame for wala like for donkey years we've been talking and people still making the same decision. We can continue with it. The consequences iko labu na jono ko fa dabako and momo tara jabe kalam bele feji. So there's nobody to blame but ourselves. Again, Yajame did all his atrocities between 1994 and 1996. We rewarded him in 1996. Between 96 and 2001, he killed those students, including so many other atrocities. He was rewarded with power again. Between 2001 and 2006, he killed Deda Hydra, shot Usman Silla, disappeared Chief Ibrahim Mane, and so many other atrocities. We rewarded him with power again. Back to 2011, he started this whole tribal politics, the junglers capturing and murdering people in cold blood. In the dark of night, he was still rewarded with power. 2016, he was about to be rewarded with power again. If those ID cards were not, set on fire in that APRC bureau, Jammeh would have won, even though we had a coalition. Everybody knows that. They just couldn't use those things. That's why he was hung up on that number. Exactly the same number that was burned down in those, in that APRC bureau. And now Barrow is charging that guy for arson. So when it comes to the Gambians, we always have the same refrain. So because of that fear, we just reward him, just let him go. So Nadia Mwaro Sideko Politico until that Gambia Politico, because of the holiday in Gambia. Barrow will get to that point. It's just the dynamics of power. It never changes. He is meek, he is, humble and all that when he first came to power. But look at the wings he's growing. That's what power does to you. It's the dynamics of power. There is no escaping it. So it's either we wake up to that and make a decision to change the government, and I'm not saying vote one party or the other. Everybody knows what party I am in, and that's what I'm going to advocate for. But you don't have to agree with me. If you believe somebody else has what it takes, give them your 100%. Stop focusing on everybody else. Sell your candidate. The time you spend on criticizing the other person who is trying to get rid of Adama Barrow is time you can spend selling your candidate. But if you want to focus on the other candidate, there is an admission there called these people have potential. Recognize that potential and see where you can meet them in the middle then and work something out. But you cannot know that they have potential more than you have potential, and you're constantly attacking them, even though you want this government to go. It's kind of like shooting yourself in the foot. Look at where we are in America here. Trump, what he is doing. Most of the people who are disappointed are people who voted for him, because everybody else knew what would potentially happen under a Trump presidency. Everything would get worse. Whatever he promised, they knew he was a con man. But for whatever reason, we were like, Harris is not it. So we're just going to vote for Trump. Now, go to TikTok. Most of the people who are completely 100% disappointed and are crying online are the people who supported him because they think he was going to change things, even though they had a better candidate. So we had the same options in the Gambia. If you want, we can continue with him. People will continue to manage, but we won't have a country left anymore, like Trump would say. Anyway, so we'll continue to talk and see what happens in 2026. Thank you, guys.